I want you to just welcome my friend Bill. Bill, come on up here right away. We want to give you lots of time. So, and before Bill speaks, my name is Bob, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. And I've been dealing with a lot of things in my life, but particularly dealing with the issues of how anger has affected my life and affected other people's lives. And I'm grateful for God's work in my life. Bill, the stage is yours, ready to go. And don't worry exactly about that time, but I'll kind of call you out probably in about 25, 30 minutes. Okay, you ready to go?
Yeah.
God help Bill and let him have a great time tonight.
Hi, guys. Is this thing on? Okay. My name is Bill, and I am a believer in God. I originally came here because I was struggling with alcohol and drug addiction, and I have celebrated 8 years January 1st. So, but as I got sober, the more I realized that, that wasn't my only addiction, right? I'm here now, and I've been working on for quite some time as my sexual addiction. I'm here to, and actually, I celebrated 3 months of purity from sexual addiction this month. Wow. Yeah, it's funny how this month worked out. So January 1st was my 8 years. January 10th was my 47th birthday, and I celebrated 3 months that day, right? So January 8th was my daughter Maddie's birthday. Today is my daughter Alicia's birthday. She's 11. So it's a really big month for my family, and kind of what Brian was saying, like it's been a tough month as well, right? So, finances were tough, but I'm going to get into this. So, like I said, my name is Bill. I was born January 10th, 1972. I was born in the Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster. My mom and dad, my mom Leslie and my dad Arthur, but his name's Butch, an old school name. I have a sister, her name is Terry, and she's 2 years younger. My mom and dad met when they were like teenagers, 12 or 13. I guess she was 12 or 13 and he was 15, and they married 6 years later. And then I was born. My mom was 18 when I was born, and it was kids trying to raise a kid, right? So they did the best they could, but they fought a lot. They broke up a lot, and some of my earliest memories were going to sleep to parties in our house. I'm a child of the 70s, right? There was a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol back then. And, I remember waking up to go to the washroom and mom or dad running to me because they didn't want me coming out into the party, right? I can't tell you how many times I fell asleep to all the noise in my house. I also, I remember waking up in the car outside of a house or a bar because, mom or dad wanted to stop or go see some friends, right? And I don't really remember how old I was. Some of my earliest memories, I was about 4 or 5 when this kind of stuff started happening. I remember waking up Christmas morning to find out Santa didn't come because he got drunk the night before. And there was no presents there. My mom, she was the second oldest of 5 daughters. And my grandpa was ship's captain. He used to he was the captain of one of those big log ships that tip and dump all the logs into the water. And he was gone for, 3 weeks or more at a time, right? So, my mom was the second oldest of 5 daughters. That was quite the childhood she had. Mom's sister last summer just actually did one of those DNA tests, and she found out that her and all of her sisters have different fathers. Grandma got around. And, it was an interesting childhood growing up, right? My dad was the youngest of 4. He had 2 older sisters and an older brother, and his brother was at least 10 years older than him. I can't remember how long ago it was, but Dad shared with me one time that his older brother molested him, and that's why he hated him. Because I was like, he always hated my uncle. And I couldn't figure out why. And then finally one day I asked him, right? And, you know, it made sense. And, you know, so when I was about, I don't know, about 4, Mom and Dad moved to Prince George. And they were living separately at the time. And Mom used to work at this bar called the PG Inn or something like that. And she used to get me this babysitter. It was a girl who was 13 or 14. And you know, one night that girl's like, hey, let's play house. Right? And I'm like, what do you mean, let's play house? And, you know, next thing I know, she's taking me into the bedroom and putting me on top of her, right? She got me to be the daddy, and she was the mommy. And, you know, really, when I look back at it, that's when my addiction was born, right? My sexual addiction. I from that day on, I was constantly looking for some way of acting out. Like, you know, I remember going to my friend's house and seeing a lady passed out on the couch, and she was half naked, and it just kind of, fireworks went off in my mind, right? You know, it pretty much changed me forever. And you know, until 7 years ago, I didn't realize that it was wrong. You know, I didn't realize that I had been molested. I thought it was just the way things happen. And I didn't say anything to anybody about it because I didn't know it was, you know, I guess in my heart I knew, but it was one of those things that I just didn't talk about, right? So, you know, I thought it was normal to do with my cousins or other kids what was done to me, you know, and I ended up passing that on to others, right? You know, I remember in grade 5, I was out in the playground, and these 2 boys were with a girl out in the playground, and she was laying there with her pants off, and I was like, I was so excited because I didn't realize, you know, I was like, well, what's going on here? I got to see this, you know, and it was one of those things, right? Like, I remember it was like, I don't know, I mean, thinking that something like that is normal is so not normal. But, you know, growing up, that's what I did, right? And I used to stay at my granny's place in Pitt Meadows on weekends, and I was about between 7 and 9, and, you know, I discovered masturbation, and honestly, it scared the crap out of me. It really did. I had no idea. I had to call my granny. I was scared, and I went running to her, and I had no idea what had happened. But that didn't stop me, you know. When I was 13, my mom's second husband had a room with a secret drawer. It had videos in it, and it had magazines in it. And, you know, it was a room I frequented when no one was home because I knew I could get away with it, right? And, you know, at that time, that really got my addiction going, you know. I need to backtrack a little bit. I was thinking about how I was raised, right? Like I said, I've got 8 years sobriety from alcohol and drugs. And alcohol and drugs are a huge part of my story. You know, I remember when I was little, my dad always had pot plants in the basement, or he had a room sectioned off that had rows of plants in it, and I used to play in there with him when he was in there. And, you know, in the 70s, it was like, I'm thinking about it now, and it's like, it's just so wrong, right? But it's what I knew. And, you know, when I was about 7 or 8, it was the thing, you know, my parents were drinking at Christmas, and, you know, my dad had this bottle of green stuff, and so it was cream de menthe, and, you know, he gave me a little bit in a glass with some 7-Up, and, you know, being that I'd already started on my addiction in one sense, that really fired my addiction for another. And, you know, I got into drinking and smoking pot on a regular basis when I was 13. You know, whenever my dad used to do a harvest, he'd give me a big bag of it, right? And, you know, I was the cool kid at the arcade back then, right? Because I could, you know, sell you $5 joints. You know, I'd had extra money to buy munchies and go to 7-Eleven and, you know, like buy my, you know, I used to love those nachos with the cheese sauce in 7-Eleven, and that stuff was awesome. don't know if it was really good for me, but I sure liked it. But then again, there's so much stuff in my life that I did that wasn't good for me. That was the least of my worries. No, it really wasn't. So, as I got older, my drinking continued, so did my drug use, and so did my desire to, I always tried to meet the right girl. I wanted to meet the right girl, but, I guess you could say I was a serial dater, really. I mean, I was like, I had to have a girlfriend because, right here, I felt empty inside unless I did. If I had a pretty girl on my arm, the guys would think I'm cool, right? It's like going out and having a $50,000 sports car. Doesn't mean you have money, right? Just because I could get a pretty girl didn't mean I was a real person inside, or, but I didn't know that at the time, right? I'm kind of going off of this a little bit, so I'm trying to stay on structure here.
Right, Bill.
Thanks, Sean. So, I don't know about you guys, but you ever go to a party and see that guy passed out in the corner with all the stuff in his hair? Yeah, that was me. Yeah. So many times I woke up at parties with like yellow model paint on my fingernails, or something in my hair, or Sharpie all over my body. People laugh because it probably happened to them, right? That's why they laugh, So I know I'm not alone. And I know I'm not alone in this room, so that's a good thing. Happened to me quite often. And I had no idea, right? Like, I'd wake up the next morning, and I was a blackout drinker pretty much from the start. 13, 14 was the first time I blacked out on Jack Daniels. Good idea at 13 to drink Jack Daniels. Not. So, the Jack Daniels really pulled a number on me, and I was kind of the drinker that I'd wake up the next morning from a blackout, and my buddies would be like, "You remember what you did?" And everybody's laughing at it, and like, I was the talk of the town, right? And I'm like, "No, what did I do?" It's funny when I look back at my life, right? Like, I'm really proud of who I am today. It's taken me a long time to get to this point, but man, I put myself through a lot. When I was 17, I was drinking and driving from the first day I got my license, right? When I was 17, I was at a party in Maple Ridge, and my best friend jumped in the back of my pickup truck. I was racing with another friend to go to another party, and I went around this S-turn. And as I went around the S-turn, I hit the gravel shoulder. And my best friend that was in the back of my truck went into the ditch, flipped over, and landed on him. Paralyzed my best friend for life, right? But do you think that stopped me? No. I did a lot of counseling, but I was okay. It wasn't me, it was somebody else, right? Really when it came to girls, when it came to drinking, when it came to drugs, one was too many and 1,000 was never enough. I've done a lot of damage in my life, but really God has been working in my life the whole time. When I look back at my life, at all the times that, I was talking to somebody earlier about all the times I drank and drove, or I woke up from a blackout and I got home safe. I was in this, I spent most of my teens in Vancouver, and I was in a party. I was at a party with my friends in Vancouver. So I was from Maple Ridge, and we were in Vancouver. So basically in Victoria, in the island, it's like being from Oak Bay and having to get home from Cobble Hill. Okay, so I was at a party with my friends, and we were drinking. Everything was fine. All of a sudden, I guess my friend tells me, I got up and walked out. And I disappeared for like 3-5 hours, right? And so my friends, everybody that I went with, got tired of looking for me and left. I was like 100 miles from home, no idea how all of a sudden, I come home out of the blackout. I come out of the blackout back at the party. And I'm like, there's no friends there, right? So what do? As a teenager, I did a lot of hitchhiking. So I walked to the nearest road. And this is where I'm getting to the God part. I stuck my thumb out, and this guy picked me up, and in the middle of the night, drove me right to my front door, right? And I made it home safe, right? Like, You know, God's been in my life for so long, and I'm so grateful for what I have today. Because, you know, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for him. You know, when I used to look for girls, I would look for the wounded ones, so to speak. Like I could walk into a room. Like I remember walking into a classroom and I seen a girl and she looked at me, but then looked away, and then she looked down and she looked away, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna go say hi to her, right? Because I was a predator. I hate to admit it, right? I was a predator. And I liked the kind of women that needed rescuing, because then I could put all my attention on them and not focus on the need or on the sickness that I had, right? So if I could look at you, if I could do something for you, if I could be the nice guy, the strong guy, the funny guy, whatever guy, it got me out of myself. And then by doing those things, I was hoping you'd sleep with me, right? Because that's how I didn't think I deserved love. I didn't think I deserved, you know, an honest relationship. And that's how I became a sex addict, right? I mean, it started off in high school. Paul, can you pull up that picture for me in a second? The one with the brain? I started off in high school. My pattern wouldn't be to break up with a girl, and I wouldn't to go out with a girl, and I wouldn't break up with one unless I had one to move on to. It's a pattern I hung on to for many, many years. So here's a picture of the brain. I wanted to bring this up because I'm a visual learner. As you can see, this brain over here is a normal brain, like one that doesn't have addiction issues, that doesn't have porn issues. The one in the middle, as you can see, is a heroin or addict. And if you might look at the similarities between your brain on porn and heroin, they're very, very similar, right? So what I'm getting at is, even though I had an alcohol and drug addiction, my sex addiction was what fed it all, because it started way before anything else. So I used the alcohol and drugs as a way to feed the sex addiction. And it did me well, from what I thought, for many, many years. Like I said, it was a pattern I hang on to you know, like I said, I've been working on purity now for like 3 years. And 2017, I had 8 months of complete purity. No masturbation, no sex, no porn, no girlfriends, no nothing. And, you know, the reason I used to act out is because I felt empty and alone since I was a little boy, ever since the first time I was molested. And I tried to fill that emptiness with sex, drugs, and alcohol in hopes that it would fix me. You know, I started selling pot, like I said, when I was in high school. And it was a quick way to get money and a way to get attention too, right? Because, you know, if Bill has pot, then Bill's noticeable, right? If I got what you want, then you're going to look at me, or you're going to talk to me, right? Then I moved to my mom's in Nanaimo when I was 20, and the man that she was married to was a drug dealer. So I continued on from 20 to 28. My life was sex, drugs, and alcohol. In April 2000, I met a woman that I had a couple months clean in NA. I was actually volunteering with the Special Olympics at the time, and I was doing a softball coach, and she was volunteering as well. That's like the first time I found recovery. Was April 27th, 2000 was my first day sober in my whole life from alcohol and drugs. And because of that, you know, it's kind of funny how a girl brought me into recovery, because most of the times, as the patterns in my life, girls have been, you know, have caused myself, or I have caused the most pain, right? So even though I had sobriety for almost 10 years in NA, my sex addiction replaced all drugs and alcohol. As soon as I put down the drugs and alcohol, I went hardcore chasing girls on Plenty of Fish, Any website I could find, I was like a piranha in a pool. Like, have you ever seen those National Geographic channels where there's a deer or something trying to swim through the water, and there's a group of piranhas, and then all of a sudden it's gone? Like, that was me when it came to sex. If I could get something, I would get as much as I could. I used to meet girls online for sex. Sometimes I'd meet 2 or 3 a week, if I could. When it comes to sex, I threw out all my morals. I was like like I said, like a piranha. I wrote that. I kind of jumped in a little bit. I wrote, and I had no dignity left, right? I didn't know who I was. So if I was having sex, I was a man. And what I discovered was when it came to sex, nothing else mattered. Not my girls, not anything, not me, not you. And, with Psalm 147:3 says, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. So that brought me to CR. I moved to Victoria, it will be 8 years ago in May. And I moved here because my ex told me that if I moved here to help take care of my girls, that we could get counseling, right? And didn't happen. It's okay, right? But I moved from Nanaimo on my own to Victoria, and not knowing where I was moving to, I moved to Souk. And I moved 5 kilometers up Otter Point Road in Souk. It wasn't just Souk. It was like up the top of a mountain. But, it was funny how God was working, right? Because this lady that was my landlord knew that I was in recovery. I wasn't shy about it, so I told her. And she was talking about this church in Victoria. Said this church in Victoria had this amazing recovery program, and I had to try it out because I also shared my faith with her, right? So a few months later, I moved into town. I was living in View Royal, and the girls and I, it was August, and the girls and I were like had nothing to do. So I'm like, I piled them in the car. They were 1 and 3 at the time. So like Maddie was like, right? And I started to follow my heart. I started to drive into town, and I started to look for churches. And I'd been to the Mustard Seed before, so I went there, but it doesn't have church till 1 o'clock on a Sunday. And something was pulling me this way, right? So when I left the Mustard Seed, I ended up on Caledonia, and I ended up driving up Caledonia across Blanchard. And there's a lady on the street with a big yellow sign saying, church parking. I pulled in, right? It was a sign from God, right? So girls and I got in, and then right away there was tea and cookies, so they were happy, right? The cookies, happy. And again, another sign from God. This girl that was friends with Shelley, which is Ali and Maddie's mom, from Nanaimo, went to church at Glad Tidings. And I saw her. So right away I felt like I could sit down, I could feel comfortable, right? And after going a couple times, there was this, they used to hand out these brochures, and something said Celebrate Recovery. It was a Christian 12-step based recovery group. And God led me. I ended up there on a Friday night. And I think I had 6-7 months sober at the time. And, what CR has done for me in my life is completely changed my life. After going to CR for a few months, Sean at the time was our leader, and he asked me to lead the men's substance group, which I was thrilled, right? That stroked my ego, right? Like, hey, everybody's noticing me. But soon it was discovered that I was sleeping with one of the ladies that were going there. So they asked me to step down from being a leader. You guys are going to see a little bit of a pattern here. Right? So then later, a few years later, I was volunteering at a door. I was driving their bus. I was helping out. Because I have my class 1, so I drive truck for a living. And anytime I can drive and volunteer, I'm there, right? Well, a lady I was dating went to see one of the pastors to do some counseling. And she ended up telling him that we were being intimate, and within a couple hours, I was kicked off team. Again, so that's the second time I've been kicked off or out of position because of my sexual addiction. A few years later, on a Friday night at CR dinner, a friend of mine who had been telling about my sexual addiction for quite some time approached me and told me about the Conqueror series. And he said that it was a 5-week program for men with sexual addictions. It's a Christian program. It's like 5 DVD series that he was running at his house. It was a Christ-centered study, and it taught me about things like the noose of addiction. It taught me about, that diagram as well. Paul, do you have the noose of addiction? Here's the noose of addiction, right? So it starts off, just kind of does a circle, right? Ritual, keeping the lid on it, further shame and guilt, and then fantasy, right? So the further, when that noose is around your neck, the more you pull, the more you struggle, right? And, one thing I've learned about the difference between guilt and shame is that guilt makes you feel bad, but shame says you are bad. And the one thing I've learned through all my journey is God doesn't make junk, right? I came to understand my sex addiction through this program. Right now I'm working on what's called the 7 Pillars, which I want to touch on in a minute. But the Conquer series, I went through it with a group of guys, a few groups of guys. Actually, a couple of you are here tonight, and, I'm really glad you're here. This is a series where guys get to be intimate, or, they pour their heart out to each other, and they really get to understand that they're not alone, right? And the great thing about being in recovery is if you come to recovery, no matter what it is, you get honest and you share, then you will find other things that other people you have in common with, right? And, that's just it. A bunch of guys together who are battling the same addiction have something in common, right? So I came to understand my sex addiction. Sex addiction, it's a betrayal of one's spouse or partner, masculinity or femininity, betrayal of one's integrity or dignity, and it is the lowest form of all addictions. Today, it's now being recognized as one of the most powerful of all addictions, and it's a plague in the church. And a lot of us don't realize how badly this is actually affecting us. Porn, sex, and masturbation, unprotected sex, and what's the other sex? I mean, there's lots of other sex, dangerous sex or sex with strangers, right? Because there's so many STDs out there that sometimes don't actually develop till years down the road. So after I did the Conquer series a few times, we did what was called the 7 Pillars. The 7 Pillars is basically, to those of you, it's a 12-step program for men with sexual addictions. And it takes about 8 months. We meet every week for a couple hours, and we dig really, really deep, and that's actually the first time I ever got any purity in my life, was the first time I did the 7 Pillars. And I had almost 9 months. Prior to that, just coming to group, sharing about group, in group, I couldn't get more than a week or two, right? And Dr. Ted Roberts is the one who illustrated the Conquer series, and he associates sexual addiction to, like, okay, so say I came into church and said, I'm a sex addict, I need help, right? And he's like, well, let's pray for you. And then I'll go back the next week and I'll say, well, I couldn't do it. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? I prayed for you, right? Well, unfortunately, God works in so many ways, but he also works through others, right? So he expects us to, in my experience, to do the work. I can't just stand around and say, well, God, save me. Why didn't you save me, God? Well, that's because I wasn't doing the work, right? And I've been really doing the work the last couple of years. So in these groups, they strongly recommend absolute purity. And like I said, for the first time a couple years ago, I had 8 months. Around 8 months, I began to experience what love could be like. And I went into denial about my addiction, which caused me more harm and caused more harm to my heart than ever before. Last year, in February, I parted ways with someone who I cared very deeply for. And let's just say it was a year of self-discovery. I spent probably 10 months on the couch. I'd go to work and I'd do a couple groups and I'd come here, but then I would stay home. I would isolate. I wouldn't do anything. And in a sense, it sucked, but also for the first time in my life, one thing, I didn't get into a relationship. I didn't try and mask the pain that I was going through and hide from it. I'd let it come through me, and I felt it, and I trusted in the process, and I trusted God that no matter what I'm going through, He's going to protect me. He's going to get me through it, right? So afterward, the first 7 Pillars group stopped or ended. My friend Mike and I were talking. We were in it together. And we were like, we really want to keep this going. So we put it out there to a group of guys. And we continued on at my house, and we did the Conqueror series. We did the Conqueror series 4 or 5 times, 6, 100. Seemed like forever. Honestly, if you're struggling with sex addiction, the Conqueror series will save your life. But right now, if I do it one more time, I'm going to blow my brains out. So we decided to do the 7 Pillars again. And like I said, I went deep the first time, but I relapsed. So there was something there that I didn't deal with, right? And this time, we've been at it, 4 months, 5 months? And Mike's back there nodding his head for those guys, if you guys are wondering what I'm doing. And praise God, I've got 4 months sobriety or purity on February 7th, right? So, this stuff really works if you want it to work, right? So Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Through all my struggles, I did stay at CR in my men's groups, like I said, and we are working on the 7 Pillars. So, I'm going to round it off here, but you know what? I'm really grateful you guys are all here. There's some people that I haven't seen in a while, and there's some people that I love dearly. I'm glad you guys are here. Really, this isn't about me. The reason I wanted to share this is to share with you guys what God's done for me and what He can do for you if you want it. If you're struggling with something today, reach out and talk to someone. And like I said, I also go to secular program. I go to AA. And this I was reading this it's called the 12 and 12, 12-step, 12 tradition. And it says, those of us who come to make regular use of prayer would no more do without it than we would refuse air, food, or sunshine. And for some reason, when we refuse air, light, or food, the body suffers. And when we turn away from meditation and prayer, we likewise deprive our minds. Our emotions and our intuitions are vitally needed support. As the body can fail its purpose for the lack of nourishment, so can the soul. We all need the light of God. I think I'm done.
You can just keep standing because we're going to break for group here. We don't mind that we took a few extra minutes to go this direction. I got only a couple things to say. Thanks, Bill, for speaking tonight. If you're here and this is an area of your life that you're moving toward, you step out of denial and into God's grace. And that's what Bill was talking about tonight. One verse I would give to you tonight, too, is confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you might be healed. Not so that you'll be forgiven. God forgives. And somebody else, take responsibility in our lives. Say your stuff with, here's another thing we say around here. Don't tell everybody everything. Even in group, there's stuff that maybe is not for everybody. You do need to tell somebody who is a trusted person. And the reason why you need to tell your stuff is so that you can find healing in your life. And when you find healing in your life, then you find courage and strength. And your life changes. There's lots more I could say. God, we want to thank you tonight for Bill's word. I pray that you would lead everyone in this room into a greater sense of freedom, that we'd walk in freedom together. I thank you for the opportunity for us to go to group, that we can listen to each other. But I pray, too, that we would all be committed to all the work that takes place between this Friday and next Friday. I ask that you would remove from us the shroud of feeling that we have to hide and have denial in our hearts, that we would move into the light and we would receive your grace. So I ask for only the miracle that you can do. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, we know this too. When you walk in this direction, just by being in community, you reduce your level of actually acting out or doing the thing of behavior of addiction or inappropriately responding to your hurt by 50% just by hanging out. So way to go. We're so glad you're here tonight. Hey, there's a group across the hallway that are specifically for women who are dealing with a variety of issues, but maybe dealing with some elements of hurt. Across the hall or across the way, you're going to take a group who are there at the Pregnancy Counseling Center. They're going to be dealing more with all forms of addictions and pain. If that's your first space, you may want to go there. We have a group of guys who are going to be dealing with any kind of chemical issues here. And then we have a group of guys who are going to be meeting back in the room back there that are going to be dealing and talking about everything from sexual issues to dealing with codependent issues. Thanks for being here tonight. God bless you guys. We'll do group now. And if you want to come back for cake, 9 o'clock.